You think the electrician is the guy in the van, not the guy who owns the vans. You're 17, wiring a doorbell for your neighbor because his kids keep missing deliveries. He hands you $20 cash. 20 years later, you sign the papers on a $7 million exit. Between those two moments sits a $347 billion industry, and it still cannot find enough people to run it. The wires never stop failing. The panels never stop aging out of code. The people who can actually fix them keep vanishing faster than anyone can train them. So, the one who wires the fastest wins. Every single year, contact with electricity kills roughly 150 workers across the country, and still the trade cannot find enough hands willing to learn it properly. Somewhere along the way, he stops being an electrician. He becomes the one who owns the trucks instead. This is every level of wiring America, and what it actually costs to climb. If you like breakdowns of how careers actually progress, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. You're 17, with no real job yet. Your neighbor's doorbell stopped ringing months ago. He was going to call an electrician for it. You tell him you can do it for $20. You watch 3 videos first. You shut the breaker off before you touch anything. You test the wire with a $9 non-contact tester. It stays dark, so you trust it and go in. You pull the old chime off the wall plate. You match the wire colors to the new one. You twist the connections with a cheap wire nut. You screw the cover back on straight. You flip the breaker and press the button once. It rings clean on the first try. Your only tools are a screwdriver set from a gas station. Your tester cost less than the doorbell did. You label the wires with tape before you pull anything loose. You learn that a black wire is never automatically the hot one. Sometimes the previous owner wired the whole house backwards. You check every assumption twice after you learn that lesson. You rewire a lamp for your mom next. You strip the cord wrong and nick a conductor. You learn to angle the blade shallow after that. You swap an outlet for a family friend. You forget to shut the breaker off once. You catch a tingle through the screwdriver handle. After that, you check the tester twice before touching anything. None of this work pays you much. The real win is the trust building around you. People start asking for you by name. Then the doorbell money turns into something steadier. Soon, someone will pay you enough to make it real. The next wire you touch is on someone else's payroll. That is where the apprenticeship begins. You're 19 and a small commercial shop takes you on. They pay you $19 an hour to pull wire and dig trenches. Entry electrical work starts low, and you start lower than that. The whole first year is grunt work with a purpose. You carry spools of Romex up 3 flights of stairs. You drill through studs and fish wire through blind walls. You learn to read a panel schedule before anyone lets you touch one. You strip and land your first breaker under a journeyman's eyes. He watches your torque, not your speed. You over-tighten a lug once and crack the terminal. He makes you replace it on your own dime in parts. You never over-torque a lug again after that. You learn to bend conduit with a hand bender before they trust you with the big one. Your first 90-degree bend comes out 4 inches short. You waste a full stick of pipe finding the right take-up measurement. After that, you mark your bends before you ever touch the bender. You log your hours in a paper book every single day. It takes 8,000 hours to finish the apprenticeship. That is 4 to 5 years of nights and weekends in class, split between the job site and a classroom that smells like burnt coffee and pencil shavings. Your first real tool bag runs $600 on a payment plan. It is a canvas bag you can barely zip closed. You chase a dead circuit for 2 hours before a journeyman finds it in 10 seconds. He does not gloat, he just shows you the breaker panel trick. You never forget to check the panel label first again. You sit for the state journeyman exam after 4 years. It covers the National Electrical Code, cover to cover. You pass it on your second attempt, not your first. You stop asking where the junction boxes are hidden. The rough-in work is the same rhythm every single day. But your invoice line never changes no matter how fast you get. The only fix is to become the one who signs off on the work. You're 24 and the median journeyman wage lands around $46 an hour. You make that plus overtime because now you run your own truck. A client does not pay for a fast fix, they pay to stop losing power, so the emergency call bill's far higher than the scheduled one. You still take home your hourly rate either way. You roll out in a service van stocked with meters and pipe benders. Dispatch sends you to a restaurant with a dead walk-in cooler. It is 11 at night and the food is already starting to sweat. You meter the circuit and find voltage on one leg only. You trace it back to a failed contactor in the disconnect. You swap the contactor and the compressor kicks back on. The owner shakes your hand like you saved the whole business. You bill the call at double your hourly rate for the after-hours trip. That gap between wage and invoice starts to bother you a little more each month. Then comes a service call you have never seen before. A house trips its main breaker every time the dryer runs. The load calculations on paper say it should never trip. You pull the panel cover and find a burnt neutral bar. Someone before you landed 2 neutrals under one screw. You isolate them onto separate terminals and torque them to spec. The panel runs cool and quiet for the first time in months. You clear the call and photograph the fix for the file. Run a panel with a known defect and the next fire is on you. Faulty wiring starts over 24,000 home fires every single year. That is why they call you before it gets worse, not after. More than half of electrical contractors report they are short-staffed right now. The country needs about 80,000 new electricians every year just to keep pace. A recruiting director at a national staffing firm put it simply, firms are struggling to fill positions even as demand climbs higher every quarter. You start to understand the shortage is not a sob story. It is leverage, plain and simple, the same as any scarce skill. You sleep with your phone on the nightstand, ring her up. Then the radio finally goes quiet around midnight most nights. You get trusted to run solo calls without a senior tech riding along. Out here there is no shop light and no second set of hands. Just you, a headlamp, and a panel that has already tripped twice tonight. You decide alone whether the building is safe to leave energized. The real skill here is not speed, it is diagnosis under pressure. Anyone can replace a breaker. Finding why it tripped in the first place is the job. You're 30 and the license changes everything about what you can sign. Master electricians average around $51 an hour, with top earners well past 6 figures. You earn it by owning the calls nobody else wants to take. A modern panel can throw a dozen different failure points at once. Most of what looks broken is actually just loose or corroded. The real fault hides behind one bad connection somewhere in the run. It is your job to find the one thing, not the 10 symptoms. You verify the complaint first before you touch a single wire. You meg the circuit and check for insulation breakdown. You trace the print if the building is old enough to have one. You test the one component you suspect is actually failing. Half the time the breaker is fine, and the neutral is the problem. You start carrying a thermal camera to catch loose connections before they fail outright. A hot spot on a lug shows up on the screen long before it ever smokes. You catch 3 failures that way in your first year alone. You pull your master's license after 5 more years past journeyman. That exam covers code updates, load calculations, and service design from scratch. It runs 3.5 hours, and most people fail it once. You are one of the ones who passed on your second sitting. Now you can pull permits and stamp your own designs. That capability is the entire moat around this level. It lets you take the complex jobs nobody underneath you can sign for. Then comes the fault that nothing on paper explains. A commercial building loses power to one wing every afternoon at 3. Nothing trips, nothing smells burnt, nothing shows on the meter at rest. You set a data logger on the feeder and leave for the day. You come back and find a voltage sag that lines up with a rooftop unit cycling on. The compressor's inrush current is dragging the whole feeder down for a few seconds. You upsize the feeder and add a soft start to the unit. You retorque every terminal you touched before you close the panel up. You verify the fix holds through a full week of afternoon cycles before you close the ticket. The sag disappears and the wing stops going dark at 3. First time it has run right in over a year. You stop reaching for the parts truck and start reaching for the meter first. The ceiling on a torque driver is real. The only way past it is to stop holding it yourself. You're 36 and you file the paperwork to open your own shop. You set the rate now, not a boss above you. In your market, it runs $145 an hour, $185 after hours. You outfit your first company van with racking and a generator. You land your first commercial maintenance contract with a property group. You set the service intervals and the billing rate for the whole portfolio. You buy your first set of matching uniforms so customers remember the name. You hire your first 2 employees, 1 journeyman and 1 apprentice. You staff the truck every morning before the sun comes up. You bill the contract on the 1st of every month without fail. You qualify your own apprentices now, which takes years of documented hours each. The phone rings constantly, and half the calls are new business. Most new contractors take home nothing for the first year. Payroll clears first, every single time, no exceptions. You come dead last on your own payroll for months. The first month payroll clears clean and you never picked up a tool to do it. You stop wiring outlets yourself entirely within 2 years. The job stops being about fixing things and starts being about scheduling people who fix things. You start bidding on new construction jobs instead of just service calls. You underbid your first commercial job and eat the labour overage yourself. You never underbid a job again without a real contingency built in. You buy a second van, then a third, then a fourth. You put your own name on the side of every door. The hardest part is not a wiring diagram anymore. It is turning your two hands into a system that runs without them. You are not the one climbing the ladder anymore. You are the one who decides who gets sent up it. That is when the first buyer calls. You're in your 40s now, and you run a real regional operation. You hold service contracts across a dozen properties and a payroll of trained techs. The electrical trade is fragmented, unglamorous, and exactly what larger platforms want to buy. Recurring maintenance contracts behave like an annuity, paid every single month. A one-van shop is a rounding error to a private equity platform. A shop your size with clean books and steady contracts is a real acquisition target. Consolidators have been rolling up regional electrical contractors for years now, chasing exactly this kind of recurring revenue. Private equity platforms in particular favour shops with certified technicians and clean documented contracts. A fragmented industry full of small operators is exactly the setup they look for. You clean up your financials first, 18 months before you ever take a call. You quietly field an inbound offer from a regional platform buyer. You sit down and sign a letter of intent within the month. Diligence walks your contracts, your trucks, and your technician roster line by line. You open your books completely and nothing forces a renegotiation. Your accountant flags one contract with an outdated rate and you fix it before closing. You sign and the operation transfers with almost no disruption to the crews. It runs owner absent, exactly the way you spent 5 years designing it to run. The buyer is not paying for your ability to land a breaker cleanly. They are paying for the contracts and the roster that keeps them running. That is the entire trade, said as plainly as it gets. They are paying for what runs without you standing in the room. You finally stop signing the service invoices yourself. The yard is full of vans now, and none of them need you personally anymore. Your name has been stenciled on those doors for over a decade. The morning the deal closes, you walk the yard one last time. You pass 4 vans lined up in a row, engines cold. They all started as one doorbell, wired for $20, with a $9 tester in your back pocket. You sign your name one last time, and the vans pull out as someone else's fleet. But what they paid for was never really the vans. Here is the part nobody tells you about this particular climb. The man at the very top does not carry a meter anymore. He stopped touching a live wire years before the sale ever happened. The most valuable thing he learned was never a code section or a torque spec. It was how to hire people who could do the work correctly, without him watching. It was how to keep them long enough for a buyer to trust the roster. The shortage that made the early years feel thankless is the same shortage that made the business worth buying. A fragmented trade full of one-van operators is an annuity waiting to be assembled. Every teenager wiring a doorbell for $20 is a future line item in someone's spreadsheet. Right now, somewhere, a kid is rewiring a lamp for his mother. He thinks he is just saving her a service call fee. He is actually starting a career he has no way of seeing yet. He does not know that electrocution still kills around 3 electricians out of every 100,000 every single year. He does not know that number is the reason his future rate will always climb. He just knows the lamp works now, and that feels like enough for today. The $9 tester you bought for that first doorbell still exists. It sits in a drawer in your office, the battery long dead. You kept it through every van, every hire, and every single move. The vans out there belong to someone else's balance sheet now, but that dead little tester is still entirely yours. Your hands don't fully warm up in cold weather anymore. That is exactly what the climb quietly cost you along the way. And knowing everything it cost, you would still climb it again. The apprentice you hired last year earns close to what you started on. He is under a panel you yourself once stood under, shaking slightly. He tests the wire with a tester of his own before he touches anything. He is learning the exact same sequence you once had to learn cold, breaker by breaker, terminal by terminal, mistake by mistake. What looked impossible from the doorbell looks routine from the office upstairs. You climbed every single rung of this particular ladder. Doorbell, then apprentice, then journeyman, then master, then owner, then the exit. Each level felt like the entire job while you were standing inside it. None of them ever actually were the whole job. The shop keys hang on a hook by the office door now. The deal is fully signed, and there is nothing left to negotiate. That dead $9 tester still sits in the drawer where you left it. It sits exactly where you can see it every time you open that drawer. Final shot. It is yours now, completely, free and clear.